wanna be the best in the game, invest in my name, check no restraints, I'm obsessed with the pain. I ingest, I retain, assess and I change, possessed by the thought I'll be free one day from society's restraints. Money, clout and fame, mud, disease, a plague. We all love to hate, have to play the game, have to make a name. All our insecurities are on display. This is war with the enemy, think that it was meant to be. Living in a time where diseases are.
Hey, what's up everybody? It's Ash, and we are here now officially with the first season's first episode of Tactical Awareness. Thanks so much for everybody that listened to the first one and left us feedback and comments. It was really useful in deciding how we were going to approach this series and doing things. We thought a bit about like how we wanted to do our sort of like seasons and episodes, and just somehow we were talking. Dan brought up a great point, and you guys did too, that very often we slipped into just kind of like full infinity speak between Owen and myself. And it wasn't super useful for people just starting off into this hobby. So we decided what we're going to do is kick off this first season with some groundwork. This is going to be an episode you can refer back to in the future. And in the show notes, you'll find a link to a document, which was my brain basically spilled out on paper, about list building concepts for beginners. How do you get on writing a beginning army list, and how do you wrap your head around all the possibilities and profiles in Infinity? So without further ado, we're going to jump in and we're going to lay some groundwork, some stuff we can call back to, some roles and terms, and some different list building formats that in the future hopefully help you guys sort of parse our list discussions. And this might be old hat for some people. It's by no means comprehensive. It's like a starting off point that we've found useful, and hopefully you guys do too. So big thanks for listening in, and here we go, the first season's first episode of Tactical Awareness. All right, well, let's dive in on episode 1. This is roles and combat groups in Infinity N4 and basic list writing fundamentals. So before we get started on the primary objective points of this mission, I was just going to catch up with everybody and see how your week went and what you guys did in your Infinity hobby. So why don't we start with Dan? You got another game in.
Yeah, I was like pretty confident. I won my first game. I got some really lucky criticals, and that had nothing to do with it, of course. And it was a good time. And then I played another game, and I discovered a lot of, whatever deep striking, whatever that's called, and combat jump, I think. And then lots of camo markers everywhere, and smoke grenades. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. And it was a good learning experience.
So what'd you take? So Owen tended to try to introduce like a new rule in every game you guys played. What was the big new rules that you had to kind of sink your teeth into day 3 of this game?
Camo markers like inches outside my deployment up on top of tall buildings.
Impersonators. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
It camo markers or impersonators?
It was both.
Those both. even better.
Yeah, and then luckily he failed his roll to jump behind my guys into cover, and while I was out of cover, and to slaughter me. So that was it could have been worse.
So what army were you playing? Was it Shavasti?
Yeah.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, the key pieces in the list were Mind Layer, Speculo Killer, 3 Calibans. And there were other things, but those 4 did all the things that they needed to do.
What mission was it?
The mission we played.
So capture the flag.
Yes, capture and control.
Nice.
It ended, I believe it was 8-1.
That's correct.
Because neither of us got it on the first turn.
I got my secret mission, which was target someone with a hacker. And I was like, I have lots of hackers.
So you managed to spotlight.
So that was easy.
That's sweet. I mean, classifieds are a whole other layer of the game that you kind of have to wrap your brain around. So even just getting that on your second game ever is probably quite an accomplishment, especially when you're dealing with like a disrupted deployment and Owen dropping, smoke grenades and shotguns and mines in your deployment zone. So you didn't actually get a chance to, do whatever your layup was like in the first game. So how'd you build out your list for this one? You took the tag the first time, the Zeta. What'd you take this time?
So first time, I just want to be simple. Take 10 orders, 1 combat group, take the tag, take basically all the models that I had at first. And I had bought some extra models, but I was like, hey, I built this list. I'm just going to try it out. And it was, relatively straightforward. The tag runs forward and murders everything, and then runs backwards. And then, it's a good time. And this one I was like, well, I don't want to rely on that tag. I want to see if I can make things happen without it. So I bought like some more remotes, and I tried to bring like the missile launcher to like spotlight and shoot things, and then Owen ruined those plans because there was nothing to really spotlight because it was all impersonation of camo markers.
And he did
But,
spotlight some, and he learned that you can't shoot rockets at friendly models.
yeah, it was I get one shot, then he dodges into my corpse that he just made earlier. And I'm like,
you couldn't do it.
I can't shoot at you anymore because you're dodging 3 inches into my guys.
Yeah, make it danger close. Go all broken arrow.
Yeah. So, anyways, it was more supposed to be hacker and rem focused with like some suppressive fire and total reaction bots, which basically just is a lot of good defensive fire, kind of in covering lanes, and then it turns out if you're just like a camo marker, you can just run by the guy doing suppressive fire, and then the guy he can't look at you without breaking the suppressive fire. I found out.
Yeah, once you're suppressing, you don't have a lot of options. You're either doing that or you're breaking it and do something else, and you lose that advantage.
Right. And I'm like covering a rooftop with like 2 prone guys. I thought maybe they were mines, who knows? But there's 2 prone guys on a roof, and I was like, if I break suppressive fire, as they stand up and pop me to death. If I stand suppressive fire, then it gets scary for him. So I'll just let that camo marker run on by and grab my objective.
Hard decisions. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the kind of give and takes of being on suppression, right? Like you might have to let something you don't ideally want to have happen so that the big scary thing doesn't run across the table and be in your deployment zone because you're suppressing.
Because the worst part is like, okay, well, even if I see him, then he can move past on the second move, and then I don't actually get to shoot at him.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, and then
and then he's in your base killing your dudes. Did you get any hobby done? Did you do any painting?
A little bit of painting. I painted my Delta. Who's the big armor 6 guy?
Oh, the Gamma. With the Fearblock or HMG, depending on what you want it to be today. Yeah. Big honking, the BFG. It's supposed to be a Fearblock, but you could use an H. I don't think I was going to care if you
used HMG since last week, I've also painted the 2 copper bots. Nice. And then I've gotten some work started on the 2 deltas that I have. Basically, all the things with just the basic armor, just metal and stuff, and that's easy. Yeah. And then I'll move on to the more cloaks and different things. Yeah, the purple and gold power armor brigade is once you've got like your technique for painting it down to, you can kind of crank it out. That's how I ended up with my nomads all painted. I was like red, black, and white. Go. Yeah. That's fun. How about you, Owen? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You know what? That's it for me. Sweet. So what about you, Owen? What was your week like in Infinity?
I mean, I played the game against Dan and have had conversations with him around it. Other than that, hobby side, I started getting more of my Shazvasti caught up. Finishing up the Sphinx, finishing up the She-Skin. I have collected 4 remotes, old tentacle-y remotes from my Shazvastis. So
nice. They fit the style of that army way better too. That's gonna be awesome.
Way better than the 4-legged ones. And other than that, that's kind of been it.
Well, you did get in a Black Friday sale because you couldn't really decide what your ITS 14 faction was going to be.
Oh, I guess there is that. I did buy 700 points of JSA.
The bike errata came down. We talked about the FAQ last week, and then there was a Black Friday sale at 401 Games here in Canada. And Owen was like complaining last episode about no one plays JSA. You can't even get JSA boxes. And then our texts blew up with like, I just bought all the JSA.
Now, for the record, that was the last of all of them. They were all 1 or 2 in stock. But yeah, it's a different faction.
It is, yeah.
There's a few items in there that I think are really interesting, and I want to see how far you can go with it. Things like the Katakari or the Arigatos, Katakuri. They seem like you could do something neat with a 3 structure total immunity.
2 heavy infantry, yep.
No, they're just 3 structure.
Oh, 3 structure, that's right. Yeah.
That's and right. Their remote presence.
They're super, and their remote presence, yeah. So you can reroll
5 to go down. With total immunity.
That's a lot of damage they can soak up. But I mean, they are costed appropriately too. They are not inexpensive.
40 points.
I mean, 40 points. Yeah, we're gonna take a 5 and a half to 200 point. Like a full kill team of them is a lot of points. That is a
Well, you only get 3.
investment.
It always caps out.
It's a Harris. Well, couldn't you wildcard them, or do they cap at Harris? Don't they? They can only take a
For
Harris.
them, it says, I believe, Harris.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's all
Yeah,
it is.
Katakuri Harris.
I have
I'm
the
glad we're
box. I haven't
talking
handed it
about
yet.
list building today because you guys are talking about a lot of different words that I don't know yet.
Yes, that is the main thrust of today, and we will get to that. And yes, that is it's so funny because Owen and I throw around jargon like that. I'm so glad you point that out when we do it, Dan, because I think that is something the listeners probably notice too. So yes, when I say Harris and I throw away like Harris, or I throw away like total immunity, there are people listening right now that don't know what that means. So what does total immunity mean when you got 5 potential wounds, Owen? Like, why are you excited about that?
It means you need to successfully hit and damage it 5 times, regardless of the weapons you're using. Whether it's a missile launcher or a handgun, it doesn't make any difference. Whether it's armor penetration, whether it's type 2, which does double damage, or AP, which halves your armor rounding up, they make no difference. This thing has to get hit 5 times to be removed from the board.
Wait, does it ignore like blast?
It ignores weapon types. So you know how
it,
we have the
ignores
AP
ammo
or
types. It ignores
shock?
ammo types. Yeah, any ammo special rules it ignores with total immunity.
Oh,
Yes,
so like
So
the
continuous
missile
damage, AP,
has,
explosion.
so the explosion is like you get every hit gets 3 hits.
Yeah.
This would only
But-
be 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the double action
Yeah.
where it's like every time you fail, you take 2, it's 1. The AP where you go to half armor, you don't.
Mhm.
The damages you against your BTS. Do you get to choose still? Or is it just not?
No, so you would so what type of damage it does will still go to a BTS or armor. So you can't always choose
I
BTS.
see.
If you have bioimmunity, then you can always choose BTS. So if you had bioimmunity and total immunity, they'd use your BTS all the time, because then you
Right.
choose what type of save you take against the weapon. But you don't get immunity to that. You also don't very specifically get immunity to crits with total
Which is
immunity.
its own immunity.
That's right. It's its own immunity now, and it's a ammo type only that you get the total immunity from. But it does, like Owen said, mean that you have to take a shocking amount of individual dice rolls in damage to actually take you out.
And they're specialists.
And interestingly, they're only Fizz 10, but when you Gizmo kit them, they're Fizz 12. They're actually better at getting repaired than their normal Fizz or Whip would show, which I think is really interesting. So they're
And Fizz,
pretty great.
Fizz is like basically your like strength or structure kind of thing, and then that's what you're rolling against for
paramedics. Yeah, but a Gizmo kit is like a med pack for things with structure, because these guys don't have wounds, so they're
Okay.
actually slightly better at getting up if you shoot Gizmo kits at them. And the Gizmo kit is the ranged profile for engineers. So if you see an engineer with like a little like magnet gun, he's shooting the Gizmo kit at you, and it's like little nanobots that go and put your arms and legs back on.
Cool.
And these guys have a gun for every fight too, which is probably why Owen's excited about them. They have a heavy shotgun profile, a combi rifle profile, a multi-rifle profile, a Mark 12 profile, and then every single one of them has a chain rifle, a Panzerfaust, and a flashballs. So yeah, they are interesting
Even
enough. They have
Harris.
courage and remote presence, which you don't really need both, but I guess remote presence makes sense from the point of view of the wounding and stuff. Courage would mean that even if they didn't have remote presence, they don't have to make guts checks.
It also opens the door that having remote presence, I guess for the courage, it doesn't make any sense, but for remote presence, it makes that repair even easier.
Yeah.
Like there's more durability there.
Yeah, you can reroll your whip checks with engineers if you have remote presence with a command token, because they're harder to put down because there's no like living component inside them.
I
Oh,
guess you
interesting.
ignore retreat because you have courage.
No, veteran allows you to ignore retreat. Courage, I think, allows you to not have to. Oh, courage and religious do as well. Actually, sorry, you're right.
Yep.
Courage and religious means you don't have to only move towards your own table edge.
You are still affected by loss of lieutenant,
Yeah.
unlike veteran and things like that.
Unlike veteran, yeah. So you'd go irregular, but you wouldn't have. You'd still be able to do actions and take your action, move forward, and shoot and stuff like that. Because you can't take actions with the attack tag when you're in retreat normally. And they have forward observer, which is cool because for the classified deck, there's a bunch of FO things they can do to complete objectives outside of just being a specialist. So it's a cool profile.
Yeah,
and then
you
the
can bring
bikes
Harris.
too, and there's bikes too. You can bring a Harris of bikes, not just a Harris of Karakuri.
Yeah. The only challenge is that the bike, they are both Harrises, which is to say you can't have both at the same time.
And neither have a core option either, do they?
Neither have a core. Both of them are Harris's. They're different, but they are both limited there.
What are you guys talking about?
So
Link
when
teams.
so when you make a link team on your link team chart, it'll have your access. So vanilla armies, like the non-sectorial armies, so like just like the name of the parent faction, like Nomads, Panoceania, Yuching, they typically can have 2 duo fire teams. And that means that you can take people that are able to just stand in a pair of buddies. There's no additional advantage except they activate together and can move together. You typically get like 2 duos, but it can be really handy if a tag can duo to like drag along an engineer to go fix it, or a button pusher to go push buttons and stuff. And then each of the individual sectorial armies will have access to a different mix. The core is the full up to 5-man link team. The Harris is up to a 3-man link team, and the duos typically are unlimited. You can have as many duos as you want in the sectorial. And that originally was sort of the advantage of taking one of these sub-factions, where you had a less broad unit mix that you could select from, but then you got the access to these fire teams, this like specific teams of guys where you could like stack them together. And that's, I think, probably going to be a whole other episode. But it's funny because I feel like this faction is going to be good for you, though, Owen, because it doesn't really play to the current, like...
They can't. They don't have the right tools to play the way that I've been running into.
And they have a lot of interesting tricks too. They have gimmicks like hidden deployment and stuff.
And you can also bring 2 duos of Mikes and a Harris of Karakuri and a link team. And for your 14-ish orders, you can have everybody moving when someone else moves.
Yeah, that's a lot of guys. I mean, just like even being able to take all of the individual like bike riders too, like Yojimbo can just go flying up for 20 points, which we were looking at last episode.
20 points for an Arigato killer hacker with no Swick, and you can duo it with another Arigato killer hacker.
And it can cyber mask while on a motorcycle.
And so you can have 4 cyber mask duo killer bikes.
These are my 8
coordinated cyber mask
smiley faces. That's right. That run towards you with light shotguns and then show up in your deployment zone with light shotguns, just templating everything. Yeah, the killer hacker profile that can impersonate on a motorcycle, I think, is hilarious. Because it's just this biker gang shows up and you're like, these guys seem okay.
Like the coordinated impersonate, coordinate move, all killer hackers in your deployment zone feels useful.
Feels like something you're going to have to just take notes, Dan. When that happens, we'll do a show about it. It feels like
I feel like I have not taken advantage at all of link teams or coordinated activations, and I feel like I've suffered from it.
Yeah, you can do duos in O12, and that's something I think when we do like a list breakdown for you, we should definitely talk about.
Okay.
All right, so that is the YouTube. For me, I got to play a couple games at Uplink Center this weekend. I played one with my vanilla Aleph, and I played one with Morats. I lost one and tied the other one because I flubbed 3 straight whip rolls to flip one of the 2 consoles back at the end of the game. It was Jordan was so happy too because it was super close right to the end. He had both consoles flipped to him. But he wasn't standing on one. He was standing on the other. I drop bared with my Kurgat engineer, a couple of drop bears next to him, and then just walked out and fed him. It was actually his Bashi Bazook, his Corsair that was holding it. And so because I put the drop bears out, it didn't matter which of the guys I shot at he had to dodge, which means he was eating a boarding shotgun and also 2 templates, and he failed his dodge and then ate a bunch of shock mines. But then my toolbox bot, who had been a hero the entire game, walked over and flubbed 3 consecutive whip checks. So I had the central box and I was contesting that objective. So I was controlling at the end of the game for 1. So I had 4 points and then 5 because my lieutenant was alive. But he had both consoles flipped to him for 2 each. And then his lieutenant was alive as well. So it was 5-5. I really like Uplink Center. It has a really good mix of like you have to go do things during the game and they're opposed, so it's not one of those console missions where you flip a console and then it just belongs to you forever. Even if your opponent goes and flips it, you have to defend it afterwards too, and you also want to be in contact with it on the end of the 3rd round. And the central one's just like a control objective, but it's worth 3, so it's a really enjoyable mission. I'm glad it's in Winter War. It's one of our missions for Winter War, and I think it's going to be a good one because it has a really good mix of like during the game stress where you're not just gunfighting each other, you're also trying to get things done, and then like end game scoring that's fairly opposed. So that was my 2 games for this week. I didn't get any painting done, but I did base coat the what's it called, my Nomad 8-point baggage bot, my Salyut, as well as some Wildcats. I got some more base coats down. Now I'm trying to finish up the rest of the odd models I have for my Nomads before I get back to doing Morats, because that new Morat box comes out in December and I'm pretty stoked for it. I did try out the Rindak, and that +3/-3 almost like martial arts dodging was hilarious. He dodged a Hollow Man boarding shotgun for like 3 consecutive like within 8-inch engagements and just dodged into melee with him. And then the Hollow Man was like, I don't know what to do when I fight up close. And the Rindak was also like, I don't know either, but I'm just going to keep dodging because it's like having martial arts. And he kept trying to get away and I just kept dodging and dodging and dodging. So it was pretty fun. And then for the rest of it, it's been getting prep done for the tournament. I'm starting to source some table toppers for the event. The cost of 1/8-inch MDF has exploded, and I only have 3 table toppers. I need 10, so that's going to be over the next 2 months. I gotta build some table toppers and buy some framing material. I want to like hinge them and have 10 of these things ready to go that I can just lay on top of the bar tables, and we can put mats on to play the game. So that's my sort of like my Infinity hobby stuff that's been on the go the last little while. Yeah, so that's it for me. And I think it's now, we've kind of alluded to it, but it's time to get on to the primary objective points. And that is going to be the theme for today's actual episode, which is list writing concepts for beginners.
That's
me. That's Dan. This actually came up from some of the feedback we got from everybody who's a listener. Some great feedback on Facebook, on Discord, and just through like chatting about the episodes online as well. There is, I think, like a propensity, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, for Infinity players like me and Owen who've been playing for a long time to throw around kind of jargon of terms that may or may not mean anything to you. So how did that feel the first episode? You kind of talked about it before we got on here.
Yeah, it was I did kind of zone out it a few times, and even just now when you were talking with Owen about like, oh yeah, these guys and now they do this and this, I'm like, cool, one of these days I'll understand what all that means, but until then we'll just we'll keep learning.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common, and one of the things that's come up in Discord a bunch is actually we've had a few people who've just recently picked up like a Code 1 box or one of the 2-player starter sets and gone, well, where do I start? And how do you start parsing the models that are available in Infinity? Because there is even if you just start looking at like the plain sort of like parent factions, which are very often referred to as vanilla factions, there's a lot of models and they all kind of look the same and they're all just kind of sci-fi guys with guns, and knowing where to start can be a big challenge. So what I want to do today, I put together some show notes, and actually these will be available in Google Docs. You'll be able to actually download these when you're listening to it. I'll put a link in the show notes. I put down some list writing concepts that we throw around, and this is purely just ways of wrapping your head around approaching writing an army list in Infinity for the first time. These are not big brain concepts. These are intended to kind of let you mentally organize your models in your faction. You can definitely have models that like straddle different roles. And they're supposed to help you look at the list of figures in like Infinity Army and quickly plug in jobs. And then you can kind of drag the models around and adjust to like cheaper and more expensive options, or options that like fit your model collection. But the intent is that when you go up to the table for the first time, you don't get that paralysis of, okay, so these are the things I have to do to win the game. I have no idea which of these models I should pick to go try and do them. I have no idea which of the tools at my disposal are right for the job. So it's purely designed to kind of give you 2 concepts. And that's roles. So when you look at a profile in Infinity, what's this guy going to be good at doing on the table, and where does he fit into my army list? And then the sort of like template for your combat group. What is your combat group designed to do, and sort of what kind of engine is it running on? And I gave 3 options in here sort of about how to like approach those lists from sort of like an engine design from like a very starting off point, and where you would like plug in those roles into the list. So I'm going to go through, and we're going to go through the roles first. There's 4 of them I came up with, and I'm going to have Owen and Dan talk about the factions they're working on and maybe some profiles that would kind of qualify as these roles. So the first one's pretty simple, and it's really anybody could straddle this role almost in infinity. It's called a gunfighter. These models clear the way to get other pieces where they need to be, or destroy the enemy's order pool by hunting easy to kill and accessible enemy troopers. So a gunfighter is someone who tries to take out enemy models at range at the lowest risk to themselves, and always tries to play the bully. So what would some examples in O12 you think, like, Dan, would be of like a gunfighter?
The tag.
Definitely. Yeah. The tags are a great example of a gunfighter. And why is the Zeta in particular, you think, a good gunfighter?
The Zeta's really good. First of all, his gun gets 5 dice.
Yes.
So it's just odds go up that you're going to hit them.
Yeah. Dice advantage of dice is something that cannot be underestimated in Infinity. More chances to spike high or spike low reduces the swinginess. You get a nice even middle ground usually the more dice you roll. Whereas if you're rolling a single dice in ARO, the chance of you rolling really low or really high are greater, right? Because you're stuck with the 1 dice roll.
Secondarily, why he's really good is he's got, tactical awareness, so that's like a free order on himself.
He can get to the targets, yeah. He can get to where he can see somebody. It's advantageous.
He's got climbing plus, which means he can pop over roofs and fire at someone instead of having to climb up, get fired at, and then fire back at him.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a long range gun, not super long range, but pretty long. And then he's also got a BS of 14, which is like on a 20-sided die, before and after, before mods is that's, I don't know what,
70%.
70% chance
70%,
of hitting, and then you get 5 dice to try to do it. So all these things add up to this guy can bully people from across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's tough. He's got big armor, and so
and what means he can afford to lose. That's actually a really interesting and unique distinction, is when you can afford to lose at least twice. Right, when you're bullying somebody, you become a good gunfighter because you have some built-in reliability of not just instantly going down in the first engagement, where some gunfighters might not have that advantage. So what about in JSA or in Shazvasti? Who's a good gunfighter?
Well, I don't know JSA, so I won't speak to that yet. But in Shazvasti, there's 2 kind of wear this on their wear it best, and it's going to be the Noctifier and the Hajduk. Both of them, Noctifiers don't have the infiltration, so they don't quite fit into the midfielders. They just have hidden deployment, and a Noctifier with a missile launcher hidden in your base with dogged mimetism surprise attack is a thing that you may run across for only the low cost of 32 points. You can guarantee a -12 shot against somebody because they cannot counter it because you don't start on the board. And so unlike the tag that Dan was saying, where you see it coming, but it's fast and it's tough, you don't see this coming, but it's incredible damage with very little wiggle room to get away from it. And the Hajduk is just a cheaper version of that, but he gains the visor of multi-spectre visor level 2 and sapper. So he can dig in anywhere you need him to be. And then you give him that visor so that there isn't really counterplay outside of Hacking Device Plus.
Yeah, he gets to hunt down those hard to hit pieces. He can even bully pieces that typically can't be bullied because he removes their modifiers. I was surprised you didn't say the Guilo.
Yeah, the Guilo is also good at everything. And so he plays the midfielder just as well. Like,
yeah, it's true.
It comes down to which profile did you bring. Whereas the other 2 are like purely gunfighters. Whereas the Guilo is like, okay, I'll go. I got Nano Screen and Albedo. I'll fight anybody.
It's true. Yeah, they'll fight the world. It's funny when you use the HMG one against me way back, and actually the light rod or the rocket launcher ones he used quite a bit with the MSV2 and the Nano Screen. It was an absolute nightmare to play against an N3. And that was because while you were trying to deal with that, you're also trying to deal with other things like your midfield pieces, which were 5 points and you had 8 of them back before there was a model cap.
Yep. Now I only bring 4.
But they're still a nightmare. They have not stopped being a nightmare.
Yeah, he's a solid answer though. Like I
Yes.
can remember specific games where he individually dismantled other teams by wandering around at that 24-inch range band, and there's no counterplay to him because you're dropping smoke and you're just shooting, and most factions just can't fight that. You can't put white noise down in ARO, so you suffer, and that's just how it is until you get away from him.
You either hunt him with other albedo, or you hunt him with white noise in the active turn. But he's a hard piece to gunfight because he bullies little pieces. So really that's it. And when I say clear the way, gunfighters' jobs very often is, let's say you have to go push a console or open a supply box or get somewhere across the table to help somebody or complete an objective or get to an HVT. These are when there's watching ARO pieces, sort of like pieces standing up, looking over the battlefield to try and shoot you as you come through. These are the guys that go and try and clear that. They're the guys that go and try and hunt down those pieces and remove those obstacles. So very often gunfighters, they switch back and forth between, once they've cleared the way, they try and hunt pieces to make your opponent's upcoming turn less full of orders, right? They hunt all the little cheerleaders and guys hiding in nooks and crannies if they're fast. But they're also there to clear the way for your other roles.
I guess kind of with that description, the Speculo Killer is a great gunfighter.
Well, he's got other jobs. I think he definitely multi-roles and switches, right? He's definitely got times where he will gunfight, but I think he definitely falls into the midfielder category pretty solidly because he can do nothing and do a lot. He doesn't even have to like reveal himself and be out of impersonation. That can disrupt your opponent's entire plan. From my point of view, gunfighters I've got access to, one of my favorites is the Intruder. He is a camouflage, mimetism -3, multi-spectral visor level 2, and there's a killer hacker profile with a multi-marksman rifle, and a is it a multi-marksman or is it an AP marksman? It's a marksman rifle. And there's also a HMG version who's super popular. And he's a great hunting piece because while he's in camo, he can usually get to the vantage point he wants to be. That's the least advantageous to the opponent. And a lot like that Haiduk with his MSV, he's able to hunt pieces you can't normally hunt. So things that are hiding in camouflage, or he can shoot through smoke markers, so you can't throw smoke to like get out of the way of him and stuff like that. There's quite a few good gunfighter pieces in my Nomad army. In my my Morat army, we've learned that the Morat multi-sniper rifle, Yaugat, is a fantastic gunfighter because he's got a multi-sniper rifle, and they recently FAQ'd it to have an extra burst on its double action. And he also gets an extra burst natively. So when he's in a little Harris team, he fires a burst 4 multi-sniper rifle with MSV2. Does a shocking amount of damage to things that don't have total immunity, and even things that do, because he outranges a sniper rifle, and a missile launcher will outrange almost anything in the game, except each other. And so he's a very good gunfighter piece for removing hard targets, because he just makes you roll a million dice when he actually lands his damage. So that's one role in mind. The next role we have is midfielders. And you'll hear this term get thrown around quite a bit for different models. And they typically start the game in an advanced position. They might use their equipment or skills to disrupt like the enemy's forward momentum. So things like mines, dropping repeaters, putting out crazy koalas, or even just having like a direct template weapon like a chain rifle. They also use their own skills to minimize risk and exposure to themselves, like camouflage and hiding or smoke grenades. And they could also use equipment and skills to get to the midfield really quickly, like parachutist, bikes, smoke grenades, or even being AD. So the midfielder's job typically is, like we said with the Specular Killer or the Assassins, they're there to disrupt the enemy's advance. They passively can sit on top of a building, and not even necessarily in line of sight generate an ARO, but because they do things like drop mines or have templates, you can't just walk around a corner without somehow dealing with them. And their mix of skills and equipment can very often mean that you don't have a good choice. You either have to peace trade with them by sending something cheap around the corner to go fight them, or you have to think about what they might do in ARO and try and guess your best, worst options to get around them while trying to get the same job done. They can lay traps around objectives, like dropping mines around supply boxes, or even just around the area you need to get there. And then hackers can just sit on top of structures using their hacking abilities to things like drop spotlight, which would later then allow you to drop like guided missiles and stuff too. So midfielders have probably one of the hardest to understand roles when you're starting Infinity, because typically they do a lot in the reactive turn, not the active turn. And it's setting them up is almost more important than moving them during your turn when you're spending orders. So Dan, I'm gonna pop you first again. What do you think is a good midfielder you might have in 012?
Maybe the Gangbuster.
He's got a couple cool profiles. Yeah, he's got a Mad Trap profile.
Absolutely, the Gangbuster.
So he's a hacker. He can either have the killing hacking he only has access to the killer hacking device, but that's pretty good still. He's got Mad Traps. He's a mine layer, and when you deploy him, he deploys up to halfway of the board. He's got what has he got? He's got infiltration, mimetism -3, multi-spectre visor level 1, and yeah, so he can go smiley face. He can kind of just sit there, and he can drop more mines, and kind of just be up in the middle of the board without have to put any kind of activations on him.
Yeah, he's got the turn 0 mine layer. Mine layer means that during deployment, you can put down a Mad Trap inside his zone of control. And a Mad Trap does not need line of sight. It can sit on a roof trap, and anything that comes inside of its perimeter is going to get paralyzed weaponed. It's going to get have to dodge basically a little goat that runs out and hugs you and turns into a giant piece of bubblegum to try and paralyze you. So that is a absolutely fantastic midfielder. Do you see any other ones in there, you think?
I'm not sure. Maybe like the Sirius bot.
Team Sirius?
Yeah, Team Sirius. Just they get the +8-inch deployment. And the bot, I mean, she's a hacker, and the bot is, I mean, you can activate both of them, so that's efficient. And then the bot is a repeater for your other hackers, and also has a large sticky the heavy riot stopper.
Absolutely. Yep, that's another great midfielder. The forward deployment, the mimetism, the riot stopper, and also just the fact that you've got a hacking device, so you can throw out things like spotlights. So that's a great way to set up things like other, making a guy more vulnerable to gunfights by giving them a +3 to hit, or taking a guided missile onto him later on. That's another good one. What about you, Owen? What do you got in midfielders? I mean, actually, Shazbassi's almost a midfielder of the faction. Yeah.
But a standout who I think is the king of the midfielders right now for me is the covert heavy support unit in Hawk Islam.
Oh, okay.
The
one we talked about last
is an absolute monster. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about it. I know you're in love with this guy right now. Yeah.
I brought him to an event, first event I've played in probably 3 years.
So talk about what he is first before you describe to the audience what he's actually about. This guy.
He is a heavy infantry with 2 structure. He plays the remote presence heavy infantry role, where he's not quite a remote, but he has not quite heavy infantry because he's a structure. He's BS 13, armor 4, and 2 wounds. So he's very durable and pretty accurate. He's above average accuracy. But then you get into his abilities that make him where he becomes nutty. He's got extra damage on all of his attacks, so the same ability that attack would get. He has camouflage, which is only 1 use, and decoy. And then he also has forward deployment +8. He's immune to shock, and he has surprise attack when he attacks you. So he's deploying further up. You get to put down 2 camo markers to better hide which one is the actual one. And then as far as his loadouts go, there's essentially 2 different directions you can go with him. Either an offensive one, where on your active turn, he's showing up and fighting with his mine layer, viral burst +1 rifle, chain rifle +1 burst, shock mines. So now you're placing 3 camo markers. One's a mine, one's him, one's pretending to be him.
one's a box with snake underneath it.
And you can then reveal and shoot them 4 times with your damage 14 +1 burst viral rifle on a BS 13 surprise attack camo heavy infantry. Or the one I found very effective and fits into the midfielder role of preventing people from moving forward and controlling the board, neurocynetics +1 burst on his viral rifle and chain rifle. And now if your opponent walks forward in a faction that has many other little camo guys that could be hiding around, you also have a 50-point monster that is tougher than many heavy infantries in the game, just hanging out there too, pretending to be just another camo marker. And if you mess up and he shoots you, you could potentially take, like, without crits, 8 saves to your BTS when it shoots at you.
Massive.
12 if you crit.
Yeah. In ARO?
In ARO, yeah.
So neurocynetics, Dan, is a skill that you basically active and reactive turns switch. So during your active turn, you're only 1 burst and you're fixed at 1, but in your reactive turn, you're at your full normal burst. So your AROs are your active shooting, which is a little nutty when you combine it with this completely bananas profile, and the fact that it could be one of any 3 guys if you're taking the Mind Layer one. And it still also kind of doesn't prevent you from taking the active turn one, because he can still suppress, and he can suppress with a +1 damage fire rifle as well if you want, and do that Mind Layer game too. So this guy's I'd say a premier midfielder, but you're paying the points for him, right? He's going to be a 6th of your army at floating around 50 points per model.
Yeah.
Although,
and I think he's worth every penny. Like when you look at the costs of midfielders, they sit between 25 and 35.
Yep.
15 points to double their wounds and quadruple their armor. Probably worth it.
And Hack-Islam has access to tons of cheap troops. So you're not probably going to not get to 15 guys.
He's surrounded by Panzerfaust Delami.
That's right. That's right. Guys in cargo pants, as we described last episode. The guys in cargo pants that may or may not be Delamis today, but are probably Delamis.
Well, now this thing might be one of those Delamis. Like that.
Well,
that's what gets it for me. It's the fact that he came out in a group that already had a bunch of like, they're garbage throwaway camo. And it's
let's talk about that then, because they are the inverse of this guy, and Delamis are again a premier midfield piece that Hack-Islam has access to, which you might as a new player discount the Delami and not really understand why it's good, but you've actually had tons of success with Delamis because they're disposable. So talk about them a little bit.
The Delami is a low stat profile. He's ones across the board, BS 11, 1 armor, 1 wound. But his claim to fame is he's 8 points. He gets to camouflage 1 time and infiltrate with a Panzerfaust rocket launcher. So his short but dynamic life will be the opponent moves up, he reveals himself and cracks them with a Panzerfaust.
Mm-hmm.
And then live or die, that's fine. He was 8 points. I will
absolutely.
And there's other profiles. Theoretically, you could use them. I would not. He is irregular, which is his only downside, which is why he's so cheap. He no longer costs Swick because they used to when I last played. So that's great.
The grenade launcher still does. It's half a Swick for the grenade launcher, but they've accepted their fate, these guys. They know that, and they're 88 total. So if you just want to take,
not anymore. In vanilla they're total. I'm looking at assassins.
Yeah. Oh no, you're looking at assassins. Yeah, I'm looking at the vanilla profiles. They're still AVAT.
Well, there you go. So you can have an army of these boys.
Yeah. 2 Sundeck Blitz back. I mean, when we get to the list building part, if you're looking at laying in support and midfield pieces to disrupt people, having some cam markers like infiltrate on rooftops, then you don't really care if they live or die, and it just stresses the opponent out and makes them waste orders trying to discover them, figure out what they are, and then every now and again they ignore them because you didn't do anything with them and they're not sure what they are, and you just decide you're going to shoot a Panzerfaust at them.
for 116 points, third of your army, but 116 points, you place 6 camo markers between 8 inches up and 12 inches up from your deployment, and 2 of them are single shot little nobodies in khakis, 2 of them are nothing, and 2 of them are the terrifying viral robot. And your opponent gets to play the shell game when you do that.
Which of these 8 camo markers is going to turn into nightmare robots?
Yeah,
into
or
tiny
is it
metal
going to
gear?
be completely disposable random missile?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm dead.
No, dead. Oh well. But sometimes Joan of Arc eats a Panzerfaust and dies, and that's that. So that's kind of I think it's funny. There are certain factions that are known for their midfielders. You definitely, almost all, like you said, you joked about all of Shazvasti, but they have a ton of infiltrating, camo, hacker, forward observer, shotgun, mine layer, like troops. Ariadne has a ton of cheap sort of like camo infiltrating specialists like the SAS, who are again in the Foxtrot for the US Ariadne, that all do this job really, really well. I have my Zerats that do it in my Morat list. My Zerat Killer Hacker is one of my favorites. She'll sit up on a building, turn into a smiley face, and then just dare your hackers and remotes to walk by, as well as my marksman rifle Zerat, who loves to go into suppression on a rooftop with -12 to hit her back. And, unless you've got visors, just be a complete nightmare locking down corners and locking down line of sight, because you can't with the modifiers against her typically walk out and be able to actually accomplish anything.
For the sake of saying a Shresvasti one, because I have been talking about it.
Sure. Yeah.
My call out will be the Malignos Hacker. If only because, though in the new season, I've learned that terrain effects are more common now. His ability to be a mind layer with a dazer and a killer hacker is a weird thing that people aren't going to see.
Yeah, dazers are cool. Dazers are an EM.
No, dazer
template,
is rough terrain.
What?
Yeah.
What am I thinking of? I'm thinking of zappers. Sorry, I'm thinking of
zapper. This is the zone of control around the dazer becomes rough terrain.
That's right.
And he has terrain total. And so he throws this thing down and he himself can wander through it with impunity. But if you don't have a terrain effect, you're hitting a wall when you walk into this random mind layer object.
Yeah, this random 5-inch circle that is an inch extra movement to go through unless you have terrain total.
Yeah,
that's funny. All right, so then from gunfighters and midfielders, we're going to talk about button pushers. Now, button pushers is a pretty broad role, but what it usually refers to is that in most missions in ITS, which is the primary organized play packet, even in the core N4 rulebook, there's a term called specialists. And these are people who have an advanced set of skills apart from just pulling a trigger. And they usually are required to do anything where you interact with an objective. And button pushers is a qualifier because you need them to also get there. So when you look at a specialist might be a forward observer, a paramedic, someone like a hacker, a doctor, an engineer, or even just a chain of command model. They don't all necessarily qualify as being good button pushers, though, because button pushers also kind of inherently mean they need some either mobility or starting up the board. Lots of midfielders also make great button pushers, but not all midfielders are, unless they're also a specialist and fairly mobile. So even things with like AD, so like advanced deployment, if you've got things like parachutist or the ability to airdrop onto the table, that's a great way of being a button pusher. And even just being able to be on a fire team or use your equipment. Fire teams tend to drag their button pushers with them. And a guy who's not normally a good button pusher with a mix of skills, if he qualifies for being in a fire team or a duo, he can become a good button pusher because you can kind of move him around. So, I mean, some of the best button pushers in the game, I'll just jump in right now and say, are your line troops. Most of them have the ability to link up with like a heavier hitter, like a gunfighter, and get dragged around. And not only can they be support troops who help him out with whatever their sort of day job is, but he can also slingshot them around to go and push buttons. Now, the biggest, I think, most important button pusher in this season of ITS is the toolbox bot, is the sensor forward observer remote that every faction has access to right now because he's fast with 6/4 movement usually. He's got a tactical awareness order this season. His gun has marksman, so he can even gunfight a little bit. And because he's a forward observer, he can push buttons with a decent whip, usually of 13 at least. So every faction right now has access to at least one really good button pusher, and in some factions they can even link. So there's a great opportunity to use that guy to get around. Some of them have mimetism, some of them have climbing plus or super jump. I think the Stempler FTO in Tunguska can actually super jump too, which is pretty crazy. And that's my call out for great button pushers. So what do you guys got in your factions? What do you got, Dan? You think is a good button pusher in 012?
I mean, there's what you just said. There's the Oko Copperbot, which is a forward observer, move 6/4. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm not sure. That's what I was struggling with. I think just maybe my basic, what are they called? The kappas. If it's like back, you can take them as a forward observer for like 14 points. So they're pretty cheap for a button pusher.
You're asking me about the Delta this week. The Delta's got tons of good button pusher profiles.
Oh yeah, that was the other one because they can parachute in or combat jump in as well.
Yeah, they can do both. Button pushers can also sometimes have things that make them get there safely. So like that Delta hacker with a killer hacking device, he can arrive, turn into a smiley face, and then smiley face over to his objective and push a button with his whip of 13, which is super decent. So he can arrive right next to wherever you need to be and then get over there. He can riot stopper stuff. He has D charges, so he can do classified objectives that require D charges, which are demolition charges as well. It also makes him kind of dangerous in melee. He drops that that CC 15D charge on you. And he's got some mobility as well. I'm trying to think of who else besides the Delta is great at that. You've got, well, you got Monstruckers, which are kind of okay versions of the Irmandinos. Irmandinos are the premier cheap engineer button pusher, but you have access to Monstruckers. Have a look at them. I like these guys. They're basically like literally space truckers. Space trucking. Now, the only difference in these guys, I think, really, that would make them amazing is they don't have smoke grenades. Whereas the ones, they're not impetuous, they can take cover, which is cool, but they don't have smoke grenades. They do have climbing plus, though, which allows them to get around. The Irmandinos, though, are about half the point cost of the chain rifle for 8 points. They have double move because they're all impetuous, and they also have smoke grenades, which lets them get around. But the Monstruckers are kind of slightly more spendy, a little more versatile, and can use cover version of the Irmandinos, and they make pretty good button pushers too if you're looking for standalone models.
Yeah, I don't think I have a lot of smoke in my faction. I think the Varangian Guard and then Hypolita are the only smokes that I have that I'm aware of.
You do have access to, oh no, she doesn't have specialist. I thought Ada Swanson was a specialist.
Yeah, and both of those people can't push buttons.
Is Cuervo at least a specialist? He's not. The most interesting Delta in the world is not a specialist. What about you, Cyber Ghost? He can. Cyber Ghost can push buttons, and also he's got a pitcher, which makes him a cool midfielder and a killer hacking device. So you can actually, Cyber Ghost is a pretty cool get it done button pusher because he's got a killer hacking device. So you can stick him in Cyber Mask and have him sneak up and push buttons if you need to. He's got no deployment skills, but he's got stealth, which means that he can walk through hackers without getting detected. And if he goes into a smiley face, he can also walk through, and then he can attack them back through their own stuff because he's a killer hacker. He can do brain bullets at people, which can be handy.
Well, I got one of those, so I'll have to try him out.
Definitely try the Cyber Ghost. He's awesome. Beta troops make interesting ones because they have a bunch of specialist profiles that can, I think, go into a duo in Puro 12. They might be able to go into, it's Varangians and Bronzes that can go into the duo.
I think in the specialists, the Star Motto, they can go
they
to
can definitely, they can do a Harris or even a Core, I think. They can go big, and then they've got they got climbing plus and 6-2 movement and stuff too, so they're fairly fast.
I got it. Speaking of Black Friday deals, I got a box of them coming.
Nice. They are. I love them because they all look like Chappie. They're one of my favorite models in the whole faction. They've all got the Chappie stuff. You give them all gold chains and lots of like tags and stuff on them.
Obviously.
All right. So once again, we're talking Shazvastio and we're talking about team button pusher. So I think you just already named like half your button pushers when you named your midfielders.
The thing is like all the other guys like the Shrouded or the Malignos that can do it. The fact that this current season, the M-Drone FTO, like head and shoulders above the others because they can Harris with the Guilo. And so you can bring two of them with the Guilo in a Harris, getting the tactical orders.
Yeah.
And they all have nano screens. So they're irrelevant to terrain.
They don't even care about cover. Yeah, just walk around being in cover all the time. A nano screen is an equipment piece that counts you as always being in cover. It's basically a little like floating like terrain.
It's a cloud of goop that blocks shots.
Yeah.
Can you get rid of it at all, or you just automatically have cover?
Not anymore. You just have cover all the time.
Yeah. Flamers will get around it and stuff like that too. Like template weapons will still get around it, but you just can't always be in cover.
Or is the weapons support wear, right? That can ignore cover. The
weapons that would ignore
marksmanship.
Cover,
yeah, marksmanship.
Get around it, but there isn't a way to remove it otherwise.
Okay.
And like the fact that exists right now, like puts them head and shoulders. Like the other ones are great. I think a little like a Shrouded hacker is 23 points, 25 points with infiltration and camo and regeneration and surprise. Like with Shazvasti, all of the Cadmus, the Cadmus, who's the drop trooper, he has a killer hacking profile now, so he can be a specialist after he scans and copies all of your statistics, ideally the stats of your motorcycles, because it's funny that way. And Caliban's my favorite. There's lots of choices, but
it's affordably pricey. The Calibans are relatively inexpensive compared to like the Malignos and even some of the Shrouded profiles.
He's a bit more expensive than the Shrouded, sitting at like 6 or 8 points more generally. But he also doesn't, outside of the fact that he's made out of paper, he can do all the things.
Yeah.
Like the engineer Caliban is submachine gun, pulsar, D-charges, deactivator, gizmo kit. But then he's got camo, courage, dodge bonus, forward deployment, martial arts 3, mimetism, protheon, stealth, surprise attack. So he can get to whatever button you want, and if there's anyone close to it, he'll probably kill them as well.
And Protheon's interesting
And
because
eat them.
Protheon makes I was gonna say Protheon even makes you more durable for getting there later on. Because if you explain Protheon to Dan yet,
I mentioned that it existed, and he
You
ran
don't
into
want
it
it
when
now.
I was leaving bodies in our game, but it never came up. But effectively, if you cause wounds in close combat, Protheon is, for people like myself, it's no longer a separate tree to martial arts. It's just part of martial arts.
Yeah.
Effectively, if you do wounds, you gain a wound for each wound that you cause. And for each wound you cause, increase your wound attribute by up to 2 higher than its maximum. So you can use it to heal. Caliban's, it doesn't work as well because they don't have a way to keep going when they don't have dog it, they don't have no wounding cap. But things that are bigger than them, like the she-skin, who has multiple wounds and the ability to eat people, she can take damage, heal, and get better as time goes on. But for them, it's mostly that while they're pushing buttons and things like that, you can just eat some of the dead bodies nearby.
That's right.
Just to shore up some of those wounds before you go back into camo and leave.
Yeah, and go to be 3 wound camo murder man, because he's going to come out of camo. He's going to be surprise attack for -3, martial arts 3 for -3, and his CC 23 goes to 26. So he's pretty beefy in melee and likes to eat his victims. He's got a real Hannibal Lecter Shazvasti thing going on, and he pushes buttons too. When he's done, he still pushes the button. He's still
there's an MSV version. I don't know why, but it exists.
Because why not also be good at gunfighting slightly with BS12? It's not terrible.
Not terrible.
All right, so the last and not least one are the support pieces, and this is, I think, probably one of the hardest things to wrap your brain around when you're starting off Infinity, is what makes a good support piece. So you look at these and go like, why would I ever take this? It's not good at anything. So the answer is usually that they provide some kind of passive advantage. Like they may be cheap and give you an ARO. A great example is when we talked last episode about Owen's super cheap fire team of Gulams with flash pulses. They just stand around flash pulsing. Even that Daylami kind of fits a support role because he's 8 points, completely disposable, and while he's midfielding, he's also there, able to provide an ARO potentially that could just nuke a really expensive piece if they underestimate it. Are they like cheap and provide an order? So very often you'll look at armies like the Galwegians in the Ariadne's Highlander army when they use Inspiring Presence to make the regular orders. Rokots, which are cheap chain rifle troops at like 6 points. Guangxi in the Yuqing faction are cheap regular orders. And things like net rods and Aleph, and the equivalent in Combined Army as well. All of these things can be considered support pieces. Almost every
badge bot.
That's right. Yeah. Your 7-point badge bot, who is like usually a repeater or flash pulse, like 7 points, and a baggage bot, like you said, who's usually at 8 points and can reload weapons and stuff as well. So that Daylami sitting next to a baggage bot can reload his Panzerfaust and then provide an arrow again next turn after he runs out of rockets. So it's kind of hard to parse support pieces. They could even just be a paramedic that hangs out nearby a sniper. They could be a doctor with a PAL bot sitting on top of a roof providing an order and also sending his little mittens helper robot out to fix the big gunfighter guys when they start to go down. There's a lot of support role pieces, and the type of army you take up to that point usually dictates what you want in your support slots. So if you're taking hackers, you probably want repeaters. If you're taking big beefy wound gunfighters, you probably want a doctor with a PAL bot or some kind of like a G servant troop. If you're taking a big tag, you probably want an engineer in there somewhere that can fix him up after he loses a fight. So all of these things are good to think about in your support role. And even if they never do anything over the course of the game, often they can be doing things by providing like a repeating net or even just threatening and providing orders to the troops that are actually getting the work done.
So what's so far to say that anyone who's not one of the other three is a support model. Like,
Typically,
it may,
yes.
for your list, who they are is going to change.
Right.
But if you're not doing one of those things, you're supporting everyone else just by being there.
Yep, absolutely.
That's my perspective anyway.
Yeah, what I found in Infinity is you have your guys that are doing stuff, and if things go wrong, then you have other guys. But until things go wrong, they just kind of sit there and either provide a threat defensively or just sit behind and provide another order for your fancy guys to do stuff. I don't know. That's my experience so far. Again, only 2 games, but for that, I mean, obviously there's the specialized support unit Lambda, so that could be either engineer or doctor, and you can bring little bots with them, which I experimented with last game with Parvati, and she's a bit pricey, but it's nice that she's a engineer and a doctor. So you don't have to bring both. And then I kind of like the blue coat because he's got, where was I? just had his profile up here. He's got the biometric visor. He's got Discover +3. He's got Sixth Sense. He's only 13 points. And you can kind of like sit him in the backside with a heavy riot stopper, which is a really good thing to shoot at people coming around a corner, especially when they're trying to push your buttons. And an adhesive launcher, and just he's really cheap, and you can just sit in the back line and have quite a big threat with his big template.
Absolutely, yeah, for 13 points. And that ability to have Sixth Sense, which means people can't sneak by him. His +3 Discover and his whip of 13 means he's discovering on 16s a lot of the time. So there's a bunch of weirdly natural born warrior, which I think is really cool. He's actually really good at paralyzing people weirdly because he turns off everybody's. He's like the like evil train conductor that basically like kicks people off the train, I think is what he's supposed to be.
Oh yeah, I didn't even realize he's got CC 20, and he's sitting there with his like whatever, and then it's like, okay, someone's pressed a smoke grenade to come in and like jank you, and you're like, well, I can hit back.
Yeah, and he's Sixth Sense, so you can't surprise attack him. So even if you come out of like a camo state, you can't surprise him. Natural born warrior, so he turns off all your mods. And he's +1 damage. So even though he's Fizz 10, he's Fizz 11 with his para close combat weapon at -6 Fizz, which I think is really funny. So he's a pretty neat, yeah, that's right. That's what he is. He's a big Billy Club like train conductor.
I need to buy 6 of these guys. Is what you're
getting the drunks. Yeah, we only have 2 because they're AVA 2. He kicks the drunks off the bus. He's the O12 bus driver, keeping the rowdies off. What about for you, Owen? What are your support pieces?
Let me tell you about this guy called the Covert Heavy Support Unit, Sungduck Butt. Wait, what? He's got support in the name.
Right.
I mean, this is my perspective, is that like I view support units as guys who are doing things without me having to do anything. It is the neurocynetics, it's the TR bots. Less the cheerleading squad that's just hanging out. Usually those are to fill out link teams when I play. And much more you're looking at things like the Q drone, who is the total reaction 360 visor robot in Shazvasti. He'll provide you a 25 or 24 point order, and you can just sit him down and he will do his job and threaten anyone who comes near him. And they're great for just putting in the corner, watching for any parachutists or anything like that. I have learned in my experience that the total reaction bots, while powerful, are pretty reliably able to be dismantled by most other factions, and that they're not good to just stand up and watch the board. They should pick a specific area you want to protect and protect that one.
Yeah, don't let there be good angles on them. You have them take a corner basically, and that's their corner.
Yeah, or they cover you from drop troops and stuff like that because they're too threatening that if a drop troop landed, they're probably going to die. But things like that, in as opposed to like filling a bunch of Nox troopers just to have more guys. It might be because I'm looking at Shazvasti, who are a little bit skewed for points. They don't have cheerleaders, so everyone needs to do their job. Is kind of how that faction works. Other factions, like you had already listed, things like net rods.
Yeah, Fanusas for you was your 7-point guy, and then you got your Nazmats to hang out with your keep your guns going, and your Nazmats keep your total reaction guys going. So if you are gonna take those total reaction bots, you usually take a pair of Nazmats to sit just outside of large blast template range, and and go put that gun back on if it falls off.
Dr. Wormbot,
a bunch.
excellent guy. He's a support piece. He's the great doctor engineer bot.
He's the MedTech Obsidian droid. Is
MedTech Obsidon. It's not Obsidian.
It's not Obsidian. Obsidon. Oh my god.
The Obsod Mechanoid. Medcanoid.
Medcanoid. MedTech Obsidon Medcanoid. Yeah, it is. It's true. We just call him Dr. Worm, and that's the reason why. Because the like worm salad. It's true. Yeah. But the word salad of his actual name is unpronounceable. The MedTech Obsidon Mechanoid. Medcanoid.
It's Medcanoid.
It is Medcanoid, yeah.
Anyway, I do know that he has slaves. I remember that name.
He has prisoners with jobs. He has prisoners with job drones.
Yeah. But he does the same role that other doctors would do, only he combines it with the engineer and is short because size 3. But yeah, that's my perspective on support units. I always want them to be like actively supporting, if that makes sense. Like you're either a hacker who is protecting someone, or you're a total reaction, or a neurocinetic, or a mind layer, or somebody who's not just going to be like, and I'm here to provide an order.
You see a lot of crossover between your midfielders and your support troops.
Yeah. Or my gunfighters even.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's my perspective on the supports that I tend to bring in games.
Cool. Yeah. Did you guys? Okay, so those are the 4 I came up with. So in this sort of like way of parsing your units, can you think of any other like primary roles other than those 4 that you could come up with? Because obviously I did this, and I ran it by you guys, and my thought is that these are sort of like the ones that are all top of mind. Now, of course, there can be specific jobs and roles that you can be really good at that fall inside these, and a lot of guys straddle multiple ones. But could you guys think of any other top line like roles in Infinity that you could classify people into?
I mean, I guess to get down like the midfielder down to, there's like the disruption guy who just exists to make the opponent's life hell. I mean, I guess that's kind of a midfielder always, but like there's just some that do better than others with either smoke grenades or I don't know, camo markers and stuff. I don't know. Maybe that's just a midfielder we already described.
I might be, or maybe that's a midfielder that like crosses over into Gunfighter, right? Where they're using their tools to do actually some piece removal, and they're hunting some stuff. They're bullying some like light models and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I almost feel like Gunfighters should just be killers, because it's like there's a lot of units that fulfill that role. Like they're like the people that straddle midfield and Gunfighter, but because there are the few melee experts that are out there.
Yeah,
things
that's
like
my
Oni Wabons, things like Speculo Killers, things like half of Aelith. Like there's a bunch of guys out there who are like point blank killing you, or putting you in positions where you're going to die because they've dropped smoke on your face, and that's how they're going to finish you off. Like an aggressive support is almost
like,
what I think.
It's like a high risk, high reward peace trader. That's what I was going to call those guys, because I couldn't actually think. Warbands fall into so many of these categories because a lot of them end up being midfielders. CC guys can end up being gunfighters too, with boarding shotguns. There's a lot of times that those same models cross in other roles, and I feel like there's almost like an entire episode around close combat in Infinity and template weapons and peace trading. And maybe that's a fifth role.
And the worst part of Infinity.
Yeah, it's true, because peace trading is a legitimate strategy that you don't really see in the beginning, because it doesn't feel right to lose a guy. But sometimes when you trade that like 4 or 5 point guy for like a 20 point, the button pusher or midfielder, it was super worth it. And
Rule of 15 is stopping that. I'm going to call it that from now on, by the way.
What's that?
I don't know what if it has a name, but it's the rule of 15.
The rule of 15. The hard
to
ceiling.
The rule of 3.
That's right.
The
hard ceiling. The hard ceiling on Infinity. And I feel like that's the only one that I couldn't comfortably fit like every warband piece, melee piece, impersonator piece into one of these 4 categories, and that's like a separate category, but I haven't wrapped my head around it yet. So look forward to that one in a future episode.
It's something in between midfielder and gunfighter.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Somebody who is like, I'm a killer who starts in the midfield. I'm not here to slow you down. I'm here to remove you.
But it's high risk, right? Because it's all about like either melee, which is high risk, or template weapons, which are high risk. Like
or the fact that you're just close to them.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that you're close. That's right. You're danger close, like right away. Is a big deal. So I don't know where it falls, but it was something that was in my brain, and I'm glad you guys said it too.
It's almost like a disruptor, like something that takes they're really cost efficient in what they do, and then it forces your opponent to use a lot of activations to deal with them. And so even if you're not piece trading, you're activation trading really well.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
Also a big deal.
Bleeding orders. Yeah. That's a whole, again, I think a whole other episode on deployment. how to effectively bleed orders.
And the rule about deployment in our later game here.
Did you teach him ABP?
I taught him don't have multiple guys near to each other if you're not watching the direction you're coming from. Because if little Taiga template comes walking up and it's like, I'll just sit here. You activate some other guy. Because if either of them activate, I'm gonna die killing you.
Yeah, and how placement can be more important than active turn killing.
The worst was when I was like, okay, had a cyber ghost, and I was like, gonna run him across the field and try to grab that button. And then as I ran away, his little tiger beast was like, I'll dodge. And then he dodges like a long ways, and all of a sudden he's in range to shoot me as I'm trying to run away. I'm like, what the?
That's right. It's just dodging after you. It's like, it's just the chain rifle's following me. Why is the chain rifle following me?
Now what do I do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the joy of Infinity, right? Is using your orders and your AROs in creative ways to like update the board state where things are standing, make the puzzle different during the reactive turn. All right, so now we have our roles sort of like defined. Let's talk about combat group templates. So Infinity in its like organized play form, which is ITS, allows you to basically take a maximum of 15 order generating troopers. So someone that makes an order, not like the ancillary stuff like Nazmats and Palbots, and 2 combat groups. You can divide these up however you like between the 2 groups when you design your army. This freedom of choice can be really confusing to people approaching the game. And in order to help wrap your brain around it, I've got a couple handy templates for organizing your combat groups and roles that usually just live in my head. But I figured I'd share these because they help listeners follow this discussion, like no matter what your experience level is. So there's 3 templates I came up with that when you are starting to write a list in Infinity for the first time, they're almost like first, second, third. I would say tiers of difficulty. They go kind of like in order. The first one's called the limited insertion. This is even a game mode in ITS where you can play with this sort of like challenge mode on, and it's defined as a single combat group with 10 orders in it. Now there's some advantages to it. Like it lets you take bigger stat-driven pieces that can reliably get the job done, and you can spend an average of like 30 points on each model. 10 guys, 300 points, 30 points each. You're less worried about spreading around your SWC because there's fewer models, right? So you can take more cool SWC guns. Now the support weapon cost is basically there for things like machine guns, sniper rifles, hackers, guys with fancy tools. But because there's less models in general in your army, you're not sort of as like precious with it. You can take points off your support pieces to take bigger pieces like tags and heavy infantry, right? So if you do take some support slot models that are like 7 or 8 points, the 23 point difference, right, will go into another model if you want. And not having to keep track of 2 combat groups is really beginner friendly, and it lets you draw from a single resource pool to get things done. No keeping track of what orders are where, who's got what, just a line of 10 orders that you can get the job done with.
So
and you can,
as my first game, I did that.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. I didn't realize how good I had it until I tried the next one, which you're going to try. And I was like, this is nice. This is great. This is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. You got some good advice with that one. And you can often find extra orders to go over that 10 inexpensive pieces with like extra orders, like extra lieutenant orders or strategos, tactical awareness and impetuous orders can take you above that 10 order cap and give you some extra like room to move around depending on what you take. Now, the disadvantages, you've decided not to maximize your order pool. So you are losing a number of activations like right off the bat. You've decided you're not taking the full maximum orders. And especially when people start hitting your squishy support pieces, it can feel like your available resources are declining faster than if you're taking more. So that What that basically means is once you start losing orders from your order pool, you feel like you can get less done each turn because you can, right? You need to protect your pieces that are generating the orders for your gunfighters and your button pushers. Because if your opponent starts hunting that squishy support like group, then your other guys get less stuff done during your active turn. You will intrinsically get less done in a turn. So be careful about overexposing yourself in the next opposing turn, right? What that means is look at your order pool, and I usually start my turn dividing it in half, and I consider I've got 5 to get things done, and I've got 5 to decide what the table is going to look like when my opponent's turn starts. So 5 to work, 5 to set up. And then you can put too much faith in a single model. Infinity really often punishes people with the swinginess of D20s in the crit system. So if you only have 3 gunfighters and 2 of them are down, and the one that you need to do something is way across the table, you don't have very many orders, you can find yourself in a box pretty fast with a 10 order group. So you can there's a visual diagram for those of you who've downloaded the little document. You can look at it. Basically, what I've mentally split my team up into is 3 gunfighters, 2 midfielders, 2 support pieces, 2 button pushers, and a lieutenant. What I like to do is just plug in those jobs, pick some people to fill those roles, and then just look at what my points look like, right? So I just pick 3 gunfighters, 2 midfielders, 2 support pieces, 2 button pushers, and a lieutenant. And what that does is it lets me know who's doing what job when I'm deploying and during the game. So when I look at the table during my turn, I go, well, these 2 guys I picked as button pushers, they're going to go push the buttons. And I get less sort of like analysis paralysis early on as to who needs to do what. If someone needs to clear the way, well, one of my gunfighters is going to do it. Hopefully I've got one that's good for the current raw, like sort of role and job, and I send them in because they're the best I've got. I haven't picked anybody else. This is the tool I have at hand. And the limited insertion list is kind of a nice, easy start to Infinity. So, Owen, you took some really, I think, like key limited insertion lists early on in N3 and stuff like that. And there's some factions that are kind of known for them. What's the one you played that was sort of like the classic original OG limited insertion list?
I mean, Joan Knights is the one that I played the most of. Joan of Arc with a linked team of Hospitalers, or at the time Santiago's, was you might still be able to do it.
It's
but
still great.
It's
still great. I think the differential now is there are AROs available to people that weren't available in N3. That you can do things in the reactive turn you couldn't do.
It pretty significantly.
Just by swinging the gunfights by +3 in your favor,
yeah,
it changes it quite a bit.
That was definitely the big limited insertion one. Honestly, Shazvasti has, like, usually you're playing 10. Like, with the introduction of Taiga Beasts in the later stages of N3 or early N4, have made it that there's a unit worth bringing a bunch of little guys in. But generally in Shazvasti, your guys were just too expensive. Like, you can't afford to bring 15 models without really hampering or limiting your ability to do stuff, because your guys are so, like, you even refer to the disadvantage of this, the fact that single models just could die. And in Shazvasti, most of your guys are depending on hit mods. So like one enemy model with an MSV or a sensor is going to give you a bad day, because you can't fight them anymore if you don't have that reserve of miniatures. But if you're going to play a limited insertion list, things like the She-Skin or the Sphinx can kind of offset that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's my experience with limited insertion lists. It's definitely a different way to play, and the core links come out when you start playing limited insertion.
Definitely,
like,
yeah.
You're a core link of all good fighters. It's not like a core link where you have like, and these are the 2 guys who make it 5. It's night, or like night specialist, night specialist.
Yeah, Dr. Shotgun, Deferzen, Joan, 2 other.
Here's my Janissaries. Here's my Akbar Doctor. Here's my other, like.
Here's Achilles. Here's my big Steel Phalanx link. There are a few like almost notorious factions for doing that. Steel Phalanx is one where they can take a ton of high end mod stacking fighters.
On a related unrelated note, for a limited insertion list, I didn't realize how much cheaper Jodam Double Swallow is.
Yep, they all went down in cost.
You can do a solid 7-ish ordered link or list with three tackler. I might play this at some point. I think I have 2 Swallows.
I still have my 2 painted squalls and my painted Yodam. I could.
I'll send you the
if I
list.
wanted to.
You play it. Let
Send
me
me the
know
list.
if it works.
I will.
Yeah.
Send me the list and I'll play it for sure. Horrifying. What was your limited insertion list you played, Dan, for your first game? What was in it?
Let me bring it up.
I want to see if things qualify into these roles. So like, yeah, pull up your list and let's see if you just like mentally did this, even
So
like backing into
this
it.
was literally these are the models I have.
I know,
and this
I
is
know.
how I made it 300 points.
Yeah.
So this is you because you gave me these models.
I know exactly what it looks like. Yeah, but I just want to see if it somehow qualifies.
So as my lieutenant, I just have a Kappa. It's just a
Okay.
regular little Kappa that hides in the background. It doesn't hopefully die.
Glorious.
Because my Zeta is the NCO, which can use the Kappa's lieutenant order.
Perfect.
And then I have 2 more Kappas. One is a hacker. The other one just sits in a corner, hopefully doesn't die. But then the hacker can be defensive. I got Hippolyta, which I guess could be a midfielder.
Mm-hmm.
She ran around and chopped things up and laid down fun grenade, or what I learned about is the eclipse grenades.
Yes, the super grenades,
which nothing can see through.
That's right, blocks everybody.
I had a gangbuster. I had a Delta hacker, which I didn't know could actually combat jump. So he just, I realized he could button push, but he just sat on the back with the
He walked today.
Like, I'm gonna walk, and I'm like, oh wait, what are these rules? Okay, cool. But I also had a Gamma, which is like the big heavy dude with the heavy machine gun, and the Team Sirius.
Nice, another button pusher or midfielder.
Both, I guess. So yeah, so I had a Delta, Team Sirius, I guess a Kappa. Okay, so looking at what I have the Delta hacker, gangbuster, and this Team Sirius as like my button pushers / midfielders. And then I have, as murdery, I have the Zeta NCO and Hippolyta. And as support,
and the Gamma too, with his
I guess the
HMG.
Gamma. Yeah. There's the Gamma, and then support would be kind of everything else. And I would say the Gamma, the Kappas just kind of sit in the back, the blue coat, and I don't know, even the Gamma I feel plays because the Zeta's so quick and can run around and shoot everything that you can see. The Gamma fits more of a support role, kind of goes suppressive fire and hugs a lane around your one flank, and everyone's afraid to go that way.
That's cool though, because you had all those bases covered though, right? Like you literally just in that mix of models. And I find that a lot of the action packs and starter sets for Infinity tend to fall into these categories too. You almost always get a mix of this stuff. So like the Code 1 boxes and the Beyond Code 1 box usually add up to a 10 order list that looks something like this, that looks like a combination of gunfighters, midfield, support, and button pushers, and a lieutenant.
Yeah, which and the funny thing is I was able to get to 300 points on the dot and 6 out of 6 SWC, the support weapons.
That's perfect. On the random grab bag of models that I shoved at you.
Yeah. Owen helped a little bit, but I was like kind of doing things. He's like, well, make sure you got this. Make sure you got this. And I can just adjust the models. And that's the really cool thing about Infinity is that
you can tweak.
You have a model, but you have like, sometimes you have like 5 profiles for that one model, and you can tweak and up. And if I have extra points or an extra SWIC, I can add that extra hacker in. And the extra
that Kappa can be he can be a paramedic or something.
Yeah, stuff like that. So it's I started falling apart when I went to more than 10 orders.
Well, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about really confused. Let's go over your notes first of general rules, and I'll tell you how I read your notes, tried to build a list, and fumbled.
Okay, fair enough. So I call this one Frontline and Support. So this is a first 15 order list that you can try and make, and it's 2 combat groups divided between 10 and 5. And the way you kind of wrap your brain around it is your 10 order is the get stuff done, and the 5 order is the help them get it done. And when they start to die, get transferred into that group to replenish your order pool to make sure they keep getting stuff done. So advantages, you got a get stuff done pool of raiders and a reserve pool to transfer people in as they die. So it's like an active and a reactive pool. When you start playing with more than one combat group, this is a great way to approach how your orders are divided so you can visualize it on the table. So you literally line your 10 orders up, and you know, these are my get stuff done, the other ones are my defend my base. And you'll be able to spend an average of 20 points per model, paying for more expensive gunfighters with the cheaper support and tag along button pusher pieces in your list. Now, the disadvantages of our active role group is that it's significantly depleted because of bad engagements or the enemy having an excellent active turn. You end up having an order pool that doesn't have enough tools to react. So putting all your eggs in one basket, as it were, and then having like a support group on the other side, if you get like severely depleted during a turn or you lose some of your big active pieces, you can feel like you got nothing left to do. And that's because you are spreading your points out a bit thinner. And so you have less spendy stat-driven gunfighters and less spendy stat-driven button pushers that are going to get the job done. So you're sacrificing a bit of quality for the quantity of having lots of goes, lots of tries at it. You're committing all your pieces, removal rolls to a single combat group typically. And by going wide, you have less points to spend on your high-end stuff because you're trying to maximize your order pool. Not all factions are created equal in this regard, and some have access to cheaper orders than others, right? So you got to think that things like Ariadne, Hak Islam, and the even like certain like vanilla factions like Vanilla Combine, they've got access to some really nice cheap troops, and other armies just don't. Pano would really struggle to do like a wide cheap army because they just don't have the pieces that are wide and cheap. Same with Aleph. They get I think it's one or two repeater bots and 2 net rods, and that's it. those are your cheap troops. Everything else is coming in like the 12 to 13 point range. So dividing it up, you look at your big group 1, which is the 10 order group, 3 or 4 gunfighters, 2 midfielders, 3 button pushers, and a lieutenant. And then the support team, the 5-man group, a midfielder, a button pusher, and 3 support pieces. So you kind of want that midfielder and button pusher in the support group. Just in case things go really wrong, you need to get an objective done. You have 5 orders to push around someone that can maybe do a little bit of damage or maybe do a little bit of button pushing late in the game when you've lost your pieces in your main combat group. So what do you think about this one, Dan? How does your list from tonight fit in there?
So I had 14 orders in my list that I built. And I had a vision where I was like, okay, I'll have 5 orders in another group and I'll put the missile launcher bot in that group.
Mm-hmm.
And then those 5 guys will just be support. They'll hang out in the backfield. Hopefully they won't die. And then my main group will run around and spotlight everybody. And my missile bot will shoot 5 missiles and hopefully rinse and repeat. That should be a good strategy.
Right.
But then he brought all camo markers and I was like, wait, what do I do?
Impersonation. Yeah, it's impersonation. The smiley faces arrived and that plan fell apart almost instantly.
And I was like, wait, my list isn't built to deal with this. And I don't have, who's my fighters? Who's my guys who go and discover things?
Mm-hmm.
And
that blue coat became really important all of a sudden, and he couldn't be everywhere. What was your reserve piece in that game? What was the piece you held back after deployment?
I didn't, because he deployed first.
And I also didn't keep a reserve. I just went all in. So he didn't, because there wasn't any purpose after that.
Sure. Yeah.
His blue coat actually died from a bad landmine.
Yeah, that's true too. So I forgot that my blue coat had all of those abilities because I hadn't really used them before. And I was like, okay, well, he wants to get up and just threaten people with his template. And after the game, we're like, he's
this was the guy. This was the midfield piece. This was the piece that was supposed to be watching out for all those smiley faces and does a really good job of it too, actually, in melee.
And he was in group 2.
Yeah, he's perfect. That's perfectly placed. That's where you want him. He's a defense piece. He's gonna sit around until he needs to go hunt those smiley faces, because some games there won't be any smiley faces, right? And you won't have a job.
Yeah. So it was just kind of, and I also had like the heavy machine gun total reaction bot kind of hanging out. That was also in my reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in theory it's a half decent list. It's just the execution, not knowing what my models did, and just not knowing how to deal with smiley faces and camo markers that were like in my face more or less. And I think
he'd probably benefit from playing that game over again, from playing like
100%.
a direct action game, like playing like even like Uplink Center, which is a great one, or Battlegrounds or something like that, where you go again and you actually do reserves, because reserves a big part of the game, especially when there's impersonation markers on the table. And that guy could actually get some work done, or even just become a priority target for Owen, right? Because you both know what he does now. But you'd have a much different experience probably knowing you have a piece in your army specifically whose job it is to go and smoke those guys out.
Well, I was also really excited to like make him deploy first, and then he
Mhm.
deployed right in front of me, and I was like, oh, I can't place mines because like, and then there was a really tall building on my side of the board where I could still put my gangbuster up there. So the gangbuster did his job and was like up there, and he was like trying to find out who the smiley face was.
Mhm.
But then he couldn't place his mine in a super good spot because he had camo markers all over the place. And so it was like that made it really hard. And so it would have been actually advantageous for me to deploy first with that tall building,
Right.
knowing what his list was.
For
So
the
then-
rules reason why he couldn't do that, if you have the mine layer skill, you can't use the mine layer skill to place a mine near a camo marker that's already been deployed, like an enemy one, or not within or not within the zone that would cause it to react.
Yeah, not in zone of control of it.
Yeah.
Of a camo marker, but an impersonation marker?
The impersonator dropped a mine,
Oh, got it. Okay.
and then there was another guy infiltrated right behind the impersonation, and then a guy to the left of that guy, and the mine was to the right. So it was
Got it.
like, here's this ring of like 24 inches that you can't put any camo markers in.
Smart.
And then what I was really excited about the really tall building in my half of the board, so he couldn't take advantage of it, and then he took full advantage of it. And I was like, oh, even if I want to go find out who that smiley is, I have to like climb up 2 levels, and it's like by the time I get there, he could just shoot me as I come around the corner, and he's probably some like, yeah. So it was bad news bears.
There were also some hacking threats that were never actually hackers.
Yeah, and then Owen plays his mind games of, are you sure you want to do that thing?
Well, I was
It's
like, you
obviously the
have
right
to
thing to do.
declare each order. Are you going to
Right.
move? Because if I'm a hacker, I'm going to hack you. If you say that I'm moving and acting and you start rolling dice, I'm going to say, well, I get to do my reaction then. And you already declared what you're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
slowing down.
You have to
that's-
slow down for your arrow window. Yeah.
Yeah.
for sure. And it was the whole, I learned you could do a discover and shoot as a full order.
Mhm. Yep.
But if you do that and there's another hacker with a camera, they get a free hacking attack against you.
That's right.
If
Yeah.
they're a killer hacker, then that could be bad news bears.
If you're a hacker, for sure. So in your secondary group, you had what? You had the blue coat, you had a total reaction bot. What else was in that second group? That support group, missile
I
bot.
had 2 kappas.
So 5 mans, 2 kappas. So those are your support pieces in the kappas.
And the 1 kappa was a hacker. So
There you go. Your midfielders and your button pushers and the whatchamacallit, the TR bot and
Yeah.
the blue coat. So
and
now
I had a gamma as a lieutenant, just to kind of like,
so Gunfighter Gamma. So that's
Yeah.
Gunfighter number 1 in that list. What other gunfighters were in the primary pool?
I don't think I had another one, which is where it kind of fell apart.
Huh.
Because I was like, oh, I have my total reaction heavy machine gun bot. That's like a big threat. I have my missile launcher guy. That's a big threat. And then I have my gamma.
So what else
But
was in
then-
that group?
I had a Kappa forward observer. I had Team Sirius. I had a Evo hacking fuzzbot. I just had the repeater fuzzbot. I had a cyber ghost, the gangbuster, a psycop, and Parvati with a little Udbot.
Interesting. So you had a lot of button pushers, a lot of midfield stuff, but only one like real dedicated gunfighter.
Yeah, and that's where it kind of fell apart. I was like, oh, if I had like Hippolyta in that list, that she can
Mhm.
like jump up and like go mess up things.
Where they're super
like-
mim. Yeah.
Yeah, it would just like and drop down my own grenades and cover as I come up and like try to, annoy, just mess up his plan more. Because basically what he was able to do is completely mess me up, and I wasn't able to mess him up too much. And then my whole game plan was just dealing with the crap that he was throwing at me, and I never was able to get enough board presence to actually go for the button without dying a horrible
Mhm.
death.
Yeah. You're reaching
One-
for tools that weren't there because you didn't necessarily have you didn't have a variety of tools for different roles
Yeah.
in that primary group.
So my
Have you-
my Kappa forward observer made a heroic run towards the button because everyone was still just hiding on rooftops prone, and so he ran through the open and he got one shot off and he died. But if that shot missed, I was right there able to grab the button and run away.
It'd been perfect. Yeah.
But
Amusingly, the list he played against was the 10 and 5.
Okay.
Like I brought the same thing, which I don't normally do, which is
Mhm.
actually funny now that I'm seeing, because I'm usually the next type of list we're going to talk about. But it's also where you can see where I don't play support models like that. So
Sure.
my 10-man group is Caliban, Nox, Doctor, Speculo Killer, Nox again, and the Mentor, who's my
Mhm.
lieutenant. So essentially I've got 5 models that are going to be midfield or in outside of his deployment,
Mhm.
who are all either a specialist or chain of command or
So they're
a
button pusher
speculator.
midfield combos, basically, which is like Shazvasti's like jam.
And then I have a little Harris team of Nox hackers teamed up with a Nox BS attack guided multi-sniper.
So Gunfighter.
Because I wanted to bring a guided weapon too, because I thought they were fun. But I wanted to bring it on a sniper. Because that's what we do.
Because you're one of the weird ones against a sniper that's guided. You have the eraser rail gun that shoots
still required to be a template. So it becomes a blast sniper because of course.
Yep, because it shoots an exploding round.
And then I have my my med tech and the lieutenant mentor who are just orders. They're my support in that main group. But my second group is a shrouded mine layer who's up there disrupting like midfielder, a midfielder. But then I have a Cadmus seed soldier hacker. So he's the drop troop with the morpho scan.
Button
and then
push.
3 Tigers.
Yeah, I mean, those are support pieces, I think, too. Like, I think they qualify as midfielders and support pieces because their job is, like you said, in your game, you moved into line of sight of somebody and then just did nothing. You just locked them down. You passively stood there, potentially spit and goo at people.
But that has them playing the role of midfielder much more than support. And this is where I'm like, I viewed them as support. These are pieces that are going to bait out camo. These are pieces that are going to, I can throw these away with very little cost to myself. I can make him use abilities that would reveal what he's got. Maybe he's going to spotlight this one. Where exactly are those hackers again? Like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But they're going to die.
And I think that's where you start massaging a list like this, right? Like I'm very much of the opinion that these are starting points. These are just ways of looking at how to write a list. I don't think that the mix of like gunfighters, midfielders, button pushers that I have in here is the right one. I don't think that's going to win you games. It's more about just having the ability to classify people and having a good spread of what's available to you. So if Tigers or support pieces do, then absolutely. I think that's not like, prescriptive that you have to follow a template like this, but that's how you've evolved your mindset with the pieces available to you in your army list, which I think is really like, that's how you grow into infinity. That's how you play games and learn what your, 10 and 5 list looks like over time.
And I think the key piece is that every other model in that army does a job, whether they're a specialist, whether they're part of a link team, whether they're, a doctor or the supports or the killer that is suspected, or even the lieutenant, the mentor who's got nothing else to do. He's got counterintelligence. So even him, he's
support piece for sure. Yeah.
He's got decoy and camouflage. He's sleeping in the backfield with 2 extra camo markers, and they could be anything, you don't know. And he's got counterintelligence.
Definitely. Yeah. So that's, and I think that's the goal, right? Is that once you've done that 10-man list, you look at trying to go wide. And that 10 and 15 list, if you just have a way of kind of like, I guess, starting to look at how you build your combat teams, it helps you to look at that huge list of models. It's an infinity army and go, so what job does this guy do? And again, it's not about this being the correct mix to play infinity with. It's about when you walk up to the table, you've just got an idea of what every piece's job is. So when your opponent does shove speculo killers in your face, you go, well, that's why I brought the blue coat, right? And then you put him aside as your response piece when those guys show up, so you have some way of dealing with them. It's about knowing, so when you're reaching for your tools in game, what's available to you, and just having a good spread, because having one gunfighter isn't necessarily a bad idea, but it does mean if that gunfighter goes down or just isn't able to see the thing you need to kill that turn, then you don't have the tool at your disposal. Whereas if you had 2 and they're both in different places, and they're both able to, back each other up, then you've got more options and more tools for when it comes to your active turn to try and get things done.
Yeah, I think I really suffered from my first game. I felt like most of the models were more valuable, which they were, and I got a lot more out of them. I also had some lucky dice rolls, so they didn't die very fast. So I felt like I had way less activations this last game with the 15 orders because I was losing guys too fast because I didn't know what to do with them. And it was kind of like decision paralysis. And then just like the upkeep of like which guys are in which group and like what orders I'm assigning everyone, like, wait, who's in which group again? And like reading and assigning things. It's a whole different feel of the game. And I highly recommend for your first game to just do the 10 orders or like one combat group.
Yeah,
because
you're not trying to
yeah.
reach for orders that aren't there all of a sudden because you stuck them in a different group.
Yeah, or like trying to spend command points to move people into different groups. I'm like, I'll do this. And I was like, wait, I can't because those guys are still alive. They're on the ground, but I can't. They're still in the group, so I can't just shove more orders to my lieutenant.
That's right. Owen didn't eat them yet with his Caliban, so you're not able to actually. That guy's corpse
also
is
was
still
sitting
holding a
beside
spot.
my corpses to not get hit by my missiles. I'm like, aha, I got you targeted. And he's like, I'm just gonna hide by your corpse.
That's right. Like, you're not gonna bomb your own men, are you?
I just imagine him whispering, he's like, you got this. Keep in there. Don't die on me now. To my guy that's slowly dying on the ground.
No, I think it's much more of a Han Solo saying, everything's fine. No need to rock it.
That's right.
Everything's fine.
That's right. He's just speaking to the guy's headset. How are you?
Yeah, that Speculo killer turns on the Terminator 2 voice and is just like, everything's okay.
That's right. What's your dog's name? Your parents are dead. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the 10 and 5 team, and that's, I think, a logical progression from your first game. So you've done the 10 order pool. You've tried the, this is me getting to play with big fun pieces. I've got a good idea of like what the roles are now. I'm going to start to go wider and divide up my combat groups. And so then this is where we start to get into task forcing. And Owen and I have both played armies in the past like this. My Toho army fell into this category. You very often took your Haqqislam army in this category. And this is called independent teams. So it's 2 combat groups divided evenly at like 8 and 7 orders each, and each contains its own elements and is typically fairly independent of the other, although they can be interrelated and stuff still too, but they don't necessarily require support from each other. So advantages, it becomes harder to make a single combat group ineffective at performing the mission when gunfighter contact doesn't all come from the same pool. Spreading your resources across the table makes it harder to make one ineffective without a bunch of extra work. It also limits your instinct to, and I quote, go ham when you're on a streak of getting things done, and it's going to be curtailed by limiting the resources on one side. When you've only got like 6 orders as opposed to like 10 or 12 in a pool, you're way less likely to sort of like stretch your order pool out thinking it's going to go into forever because you have limited resources. You're going to become more task oriented for each piece, and you're going to start to think about allocating your orders for the turn even before you start moving or rushing orders. So something when you only have 6 or 7 orders, you look at them and you go, well, what does this group need to get done this turn? I've got 3 to do this. And you're going to count your orders out and put them even next to your units to like look at what your resources look like. I find once you get to the point where you're able to play with independent teams, you've gotten really good at managing your orders. Now, some disadvantages, you're putting a hard ceiling on how much each piece can get done during a turn, and a series of bad dice, like for whip checks on an objective, can really negatively impact a turn because you've just got less flexibility for backup plans on a single model when they just refuse to get that job done. I had that last game when I played Chase, and my bot, or not Chase, actually when I played Jordan, and my bot just refused to pass his whip check to flip that console. And you're also gonna have to mentally keep track of who is in what group and where they're spread to on the table, and this can be like really taxing in early Infinity games. If you're not going to use fire teams and have guys kind of like teamed up and in groups, remembering who's in what group can kind of wear you out. So you've obviously not had any experience with this, so I'm not going to try and call on you, Dan. But Owen, why don't you tell me a bit about your experience with independent teams and like what armies you've successfully used them for in the past?
Well, in that tournament that I had not played in forever, I actually played exactly this. And I was playing Assassins because, of course, it's Haqqislam, and that's what I usually play. It is challenging because it 100%. If your guys don't do what they need to do, you're gonna suffer for it. The list that I played the most of at that event, in the first group, we had Al Jabel, who is a infiltrating smiley face, and he's a close combat guy with smoke grenades. Then he had a Fide, who is another smiley face that infiltrates with smoke grenades. 2 of the Rafik robots, who are my runaround button pushers. The Sunduck Butt, who I've talked about already twice on this individual episode. And then the Shuje, who is another fast runaround do jobs. And then 2 Ghazi Mutawiyawas, who are the support in that group. And then the second group was 2 more Ghazis with a 3-man ghoulie team. Notably a doctor, +1 command token lieutenant, and an NCO with a grenade launcher. The AR, who's my go forward and get jobs done. He's both like a mix of the midfielder gunfighter and another Fide for another smiley face. And it is very effective when you play against people. Now, some of my games, the dice didn't go my way, or my opponents just made more optimal plays than I did, and I didn't win everything I went to there. But putting down Aljabel, Fide, then I don't care about the orders. My opponent can waste his time trying to deal with me. I can just sit back and, try and discover me.
Yeah.
And then my Sangdubat is sitting in the middle of the board, a standing camo marker with another standing camo marker who doesn't have mimetism. So when they ask, does he have mimetism? I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, so it's a mine. It's like, could be.
Maybe.
And then a tag jumps up to move forward and eat the mine. And then the tag takes 7 armor saves and dies. And that's just how it went. And then Gazis being Gazis, walking around with their little jammers and chain rifles and dogged. They cleaned out any of the skirmisher troops. And it happened once in that game where my NCO Ghoulie grenade launcher, who is eating the lieutenant order to lob like on 3s grenades across the board, rolled a 1. And he hit a small Harris team and killed a, what are they called? What are the biologically engineered guys in Bakunin?
Posthumans? No, in Bakunin.
No, the like cheap
Uberfall
guys.
Commandos.
Not that cheap.
Morlocks.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was the Morlock in a Harris team, and it just nuked him with a roll of a 1 on a grenade.
Blew a bunch of Morlocks. That's funny.
Yeah,
I mean,
in the backfield. Just
you
spec fire.
got that. You're just spec firing wildly with your lieutenant orders. You might as well, because you're not doing anything else with them.
Exactly, and they're sleeping it off because it's up to the AR and the Fide up there to actually do stuff in that group.
And so you got some efficiency too of the 2 little teams, because you had Harris, I think, at each one of those teams. So your orders are going a bit further because you're activating multiple models of the same orders.
Harris and one. The other one didn't have the Harris, but it had Tackaware.
That's
with
right,
the 2
Tackaware.
Rafiqs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit there. It's mostly that everyone in this in this list is with the exception of the Harris team, are all like solid fighters. Like there's no bad guy in this group. They also sit around 25 or more points.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the other side of the coin.
Yeah, you're cheaper. Your Delamis and your Gazis and stuff are paying for those extra like 5 to 10 points per model, but you're floating around that 20-point mark.
Yeah, or 50 for one individual.
Yeah,
or even I guess Aljabel is 33, which is a no joke point cost, especially now that they've nerfed martial arts, which I didn't realize until I got into that event.
Yeah, 2 dice anymore. Yeah, martial arts 4 isn't 2 dice.
Yeah, because that used to be his big thing, was that he was martial arts 4 instead of 3.
He was burst 2. Yeah, you got to bring friends now. You got to bring friends who want the burst. That's the thing, is the martial artists with sync bots. Sync bots are the ones that are way fun because they get them extra dice.
Play JSA and have martial arts 5.
You can or play JSA anymore. That's right. Bring Shinobu. Shinobu will get work done.
Yeah.
So from my side, a lot of times when you want to go to like an independent teams list, you're looking at armies that can either take multiple Harrises or even multiple core choices and have relatively cost-effective models. So a lot like the hack list that Owen's talking about. I used to play Toha like this. Toha are famous for being able to take unlimited Harris teams. They're triads. And you could build them out to do almost any job. So I very often would take 2 MSV2 snipers. Owen hated these. My 2 McCall or
no, I hated them because you put the critters on them that made them.
That's right. And well, it's right. You also give them chain of command chocobos. List design point of view, basically, it had all of those things. It had little Harris teams that each had a button pusher with them, a gunfighter, and some type of support piece that could move around efficiently. So even if I didn't have a lot of orders in the pool, I was getting my pieces where they needed to be. I had warbands and peace traders in my McCalls with smoke grenades that gave me mobility. I typically also had a bunch of sort of random support pieces in the form of flamethrower baggage guys and even some jump troops. I had some super jumping hollow echoes that could go around and get a bunch of work done. So you have like a bunch of list design stuff you can start to do when you get independent teams, but a lot of times when you start working on independent teams, your faction actually matters a lot. And so that's why this is kind of the level 3 of list design. When you're playing factions like Toha, JSA, Ariadna, a lot of the N2A armies actually have access to like multiple Harrises and some sort of neat, like little smaller independent mid-range piece
Aleph
teams.
plays a lot of this too.
And Aleph can do it actually
All
quite
three
well
of
as well.
them.
Yeah,
Yep.
OSSS can do it quite well. And that's actually one of my plans for OSSS in the future. And so I came up with some example lists here in the document. I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but there's like an example here for each one. So this was more for people downloading this later on. If you're not listening to the podcast, you can kind of get an idea what I'm talking about here. So my limited insertion one, it's got sizable hitting pieces. There's an Asura Lieutenant with a multi-rifle, a Proxy Mark III with an AP Spitfires, Gunfighters, a Rudra, which is a K1 marksman gunfighter, some button pushers in the form of like a Proxy Mark II hacker, can infiltrate and part body, Trisha N33, who's a support piece with a Udbot, so she can put the arms and legs back on the Rudra. Andromeda is a button pusher. She's also kind of a cool midfield piece. The Daleth, which is a button pusher. It's the new combi rifle toolbox bot, and then some support pieces in the form of like a Lamed, a Probot hacker with Evo, and a Probot just support piece deactivator too. So you've got lots of orders pushing forward your button pushers and your hit pieces to go and do work.
I really feel. Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
I really feel like if you're going outside the 10 orders like main group, you really need to start taking advantage of the teams or whatever they're called.
Yeah, the efficiency of like teams, fire teams.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. But you don't have to. And actually, some of the best, actually, one of the monster 15 order combat group, like 10-5 lists in the game for a little while was the Avatar and just vanilla combined army, because they had access to things like their little net rods, taigas, cheap troops, warbands, and the Avatar, who is the preeminent gunfighter of the game, who can do all the jobs.
He's the best individual model. Yes.
Brings 4 orders to the table by himself because he's TAC aware, has an order, and has lieutenant level 2. He's also mimetism -6 and has just giant screw you stats when it comes to like his just raw stat line. I think he's armed BTS 9 or something stupid like that.
Yep.
So yes, it's true, but there are armies too that can get away with not having it just because of the mix of troops that they have.
Okay.
So Frontline and Reserve, that 10-5, I switched gears a little bit. It's got a full Dakini link. So it's got a paramedic, Dakini with a grenade launcher, and a heavy machine gun. Now these are robots that can be given upgrades with that marksmanship hacking power to make them into button pushers, support, or gunfighters. And then they are joined by an MSV2 gunfighter with a Spitfire. It's a Diva, and that's to hunt down those camo pieces. So nice, big, flexible, counts as full link bonuses link with repairable guys. And some support pieces in the form of net rods, Daleth remote, so that gunfighter button pusher combo in the new toolbox remote. Proxy Mark 1 and Mark 2, Doctor and Hacker for support and button pushing with a Udbot. And then that same Asura Lieutenant hanging out with her gunfighter role. And she's got Trinity +1 damage upgrade on her hacking device plus that also gives her cybermass. So she has every single hacking program. Then in the support group, it's just all support, 2 Lamed, flash pulse bots, a Probot with deactivator, the Evo hacker, and a Shukra with chain of command, because you have to assume at some point that Asura Lieutenant's going to die, and you don't want to go on a lost lieutenant. And then my independent teams one, again with the Asura, she's my gunfighter in group 1 with the Rudra, K1 marksman, and then we got Parvati making a little Harris, 2 net rods, the Lamed, Probot with baggage, and a Warcore for some flash pulses. If you don't know what to spend 3 points on at the end of the game and you're not playing combined army, have a report with a flash pulse. It's a 3-point support piece, and you can basically proxy any of the HVTs as one. if they've got like something that looks like they could write, like they could be, just a reporter getting the beat from the street, have them join your army. And then the other group, we got a Yadu NCO, a Yadu hacker, and a Samek FTO rebot. And the point of that is the Yadu NCO can use those 2 lieutenant orders because the Asura can't use them while she's in a Harris because it breaks the link. So the NCO uses them in the other team because they don't care what team they're in. And then the Delath rebot, a Lamed rebot, and a Probot as support and button pushers. So a good mix of gunfighters across the 2 Harris teams, with each group on across a mix of like gunfighters and button pushers. And these make the combat groups flexible. The group 2 order pool looks like it's only 6, but it's actually 8 because it uses lieutenant orders as well and spreads them out. So some final notes, just as we kind of wrap this episode up, remember these are templates for starting to understand list construction and Infinity. These are not big brain concepts. This is 3 little ideas that you can use to wrap your head around what people do when you look at an army list and where to slot them in and try and make sure you have a good balance of tools when you step up to the table. You should freely start to flex both the roles and groups as you get more comfortable with the game and you start to see the value in certain profiles that weren't initially apparent, like Owen was talking about with looking at, his little like gribbly monsters as support pieces because they disrupt the enemy. Army lists don't win you the games in Infinity, but they do help you absorb the game faster and keep your mental load focused while you're playing. Understanding what your tools can do lets you access them faster and look at each active turn like a problem set that you can take apart with what you have to hand. So that's it. That's my little essay on beginner sort of fundamentals of list writing and combat groups and roles.
So I have a few tips for just from my experience writing a couple lists.
Jump in, Dan.
One is if you can print off your list, use the ability, because there's a lot of special rules which are not hard to look up, but they're hard to look up and see which rules you have on each model as you're going through in the app. There's just a lot of information. It's really hard to parse that. So if you have something printed out where you can like look quickly and we're like, wait, which model had that again? Instead of like click, it
does do a quick ref for you too of all your weapons and profiles at the second page of the list, which is awesome.
Speeds up play, but also you don't forget about your blue coat having the ability to deal with camo markers effectively. and then having a much poorer experience playing than you otherwise would. And then I had one other thing. But yeah, just what I mentioned before, start with just the one combat group. If it's your first game, you can try, but it's you can get confused really fast with all the different orders. And so it's just having to keep track of everything else with all the other rules as well. It's a bit overwhelming. And it's fine, but it's just it almost takes away from the gameplay because it feels like you're doing so much just upkeep and just it feels like you're not playing a game. It's like you're taking a test.
You're trying to figure out who should do what. Yeah, you're trying to figure out who should do what as opposed to just trying to solve the problem.
Or even just how many orders does each group have and who's part of which group again, and like wait, who's down now? So wait, who's affected by what? And it's just again, printed lists will help out with that.
Mm-hmm.
But also all your models look similar to you when you first, either because they're not painted or because things are in theme, and until you see something a while everything looks the same, and so you're trying to figure out, okay, what even is this model, and then does it have an order, does it not, like where is it? So just keep things really simple to start off before going else. And that be my Dan beginner pro tips.
Sweet. You got any comments on?
No, I mean, it's pretty covered. I don't have much to say about making the different lists other than Dan's gone over the biggest thing, which would be just make sure you have all your tools. Print off your list, makes it way easier.
Sweet. Well, then that wraps up this episode of Tactical Awareness. I'm just going to go through a couple final things. First off, I want to thank our 10 patrons who jumped on, and some of whom were listening to this podcast tonight in the Discord recording studio. So please, if you want to take part, you can jump in on Discord and chat with us anytime. And also, if you're in the Patreon, you can hear this episode early. It'll be going up on Thursday. We record on Wednesdays. And it'll be going live for everybody else on Monday. I want to say that we are 13 out of 20 registered and confirmed now for Winter War for January 22nd here in St. Catharines, our first event. So huge thanks to everybody who's registered. I'm really excited. Obviously, I got a bunch of work to do to get the last of the tournament prep ready, but I'm just excited to see everybody and get to hang out and play games. So there's 7 spots left. And once again, you can, if you didn't receive an invite from me on OTM, then you can go and register on the OTM website, on the Infinity the Game website. And other than that, I think that's it for now. Tell us in the comments again on Spotify or in the Discord. You can come chat with us. It'll all be linked in the show notes. What you thought about this episode and future topics you would like us to discuss. So that's it from me here in Southern Ontario.
And
See ya.
Say goodnight, Alberta.
I have another game tomorrow in which I am excited to get thrashed in again. See you later.
All right, sweet. What about you, Owen? You doing anything?
Saturday is Infinity Day here in Calgary, so I intend to go and I might try and Yodam double squall though. We'll see.
Do it. All right, night everybody. Have a great day.